Almighty Creator, Father in heaven, as we come before you, we just thank you for your great love and mercy for us, Father. Please help us to grow together this evening and to listen to your word, that you impart your word to us as we come before you, as we try to understand what you have for us, Father. We ask you would bless this meeting as we come before you and remove any technical issues we have. And we thank you for it and ask it in the name of Yahweh HaMashiach, that these words be so. Amen.
On the chart, which can be found at the erectology.net website, that chart was made in 2010. So top is the English letters, Greek letters, and the Paleo-Hebrew letters and what the letters mean. And then there's that top section of what does each letter mean from the perspective view of each other letter, as if it was some kind of dimensional perspective, you might say. Then there's a pastel section in the middle, and you drop down, and there's the Mishkan pattern. You drop down, and there's 3 lines of scripture. You might say correlated or orchestrated to the alphabetic pattern. The top one is the 10 Commandments of Exodus 20, which is what we're going to be talking about today. The next line down, and I'm just saying this to orient yourself to the chart. The next line down was Jeremiah 31, I think. Gosh, I can't remember. I think that's what it is. Anyway, the last line is Daniel 12. And a couple weeks ago, we weren't here last week, but 2 weeks ago when we were doing the map, I started it off talking about Daniel 12. So the idea of this, I'm going to today show you that why that 10 Commandments section is laid out, ordered to the alphabetic letter sequence, and the significance of that. Why is that on that chart? I'll use it as an example, Daniel 12, which is the bottom row. Just to reiterate a little bit about what we said a couple weeks ago, is Daniel 12:4, the Archangel Gabriel says to Daniel, hide the words and seal the book. Okay, so that's the plan. That's the Aleph. That's here's what you're going to do. The next statement, the next phrase, the next concept in order is, for many shall run to and fro, knowledge shall increase. So something about that is in the bet position. The next step after Aleph, the next step after bet is Gimel. And then Daniel writes, I saw one on this side of the river and one on that side of the river. Then there's the next concept, in the Dalet position. I see one above the water, dressed in white linen. Okay. The next concept, he says, hey, how long till the end of these wonders? That's in the Hay position. The next letter in this alphabet sequence is Vav. And that guy who's in the Dalet position stands there and holds up his right hand and his left hand. Well, that's the shape of the Paleo letter Vav. And then he swears. Well, to swear is Shin Bet Ayin, which is also the number 7, which happens to be the letter Zion. But that's the next thing that happens, the 7th position, after the 6th position. That looks like this. So what I'm saying is in Daniel 12, we went through each phrase seems to fit the next alphabetic letter. And so the question, back when I first saw this thing back in 2005, was, did Daniel do that on purpose? Did Daniel design chapter 12 of that book, the last book in the book, the last chapter in the book of Daniel is that chapter 12. Did he do it on purpose, fit to the alphabetic letter sequence? I don't know. Was he actually, experiencing that view, that vision, as it were, that experience, and just writing it down.
Eric, I got to jump in for a second. I'm looking at the chart right now online. And so what part of the chart are we looking at? Is it the very bottom of it, or?
I'm mentioning the bottom row being Daniel 12, and I'm because we talked about this last week, because that's easiest to see, I believe, which is why it's at the bottom. I'm going to show you exactly the same thing dealing with the 10 Commandments of Exodus 20, which is 2 lines above it. In other words, the bottom line is Daniel 12, above that is Jeremiah 31, and right above that is the 10 Commandments. So I'm just referencing Daniel 12 to re-explain the thinking, the logic of what's going on here. So somebody could look at the 10 Commandments. Let me jump off of Daniel 12 and look at Exodus 20. Somebody could look at the 10 Commandments and say, okay, there's 10 things. How can I say there's 22 things? And then when we get back into the letter Sheen, you'll see, well, gee, I've got 4 different commandments all jumbled up. Why aren't those a separate letter? So what I'm trying to say is that this particular study that I was looking at back in 2005, 6, 7, 8 is a bit of artistic license, poetic license, where the artist has to sit there and say, why am I going to arrange it this way? And what I'm saying is that I don't know if Daniel arranged it that way on purpose. Like with the study of Psalm 119, I don't know if what I think David did, whether David did that on purpose, which is to have the first letter of the first word such that you can read the first word of every sentence, every verse, and read another message. I don't know if David did that, but it works if we do that. I don't know if Daniel did this, but it works if we do that. And I'm saying we're now going to look at Exodus 20 in the same way. In other words, if I'm just reading the 10 Commandments of Exodus 20, and the 10 Commandments are also found in Deuteronomy 5, but there's a little bit of difference. And I'll explain what the difference is. Not very much, but it's concerning the Sabbath day. Deuteronomy 5, verses 14 to 16, elaborate the Sabbath day a little bit different than Exodus 20 does. Other than that, the 2 chapters are veritably verbatim, exactly the same words. A little bit of difference. But what I'm saying is that, okay, for me to say, if I look at Exodus 20 and I want to say, what's the Aleph? Why do I have on that chart, I am Yahweh your Elohim? How is that the Aleph? So when I was first studying, looking at the alphabet, pondering the meaning of the letters, I noticed, I didn't know anything about Hebrew. I was learning Hebrew basically just by staring at the words in the text here, in the scriptures, written in modern Hebrew, looking at what letters are what and deriving a sense of what the letters mean. So somebody could say, hey, that whole section of the top of the chart, how do you know? How can you prove that's what the letters mean? It's all pondering, meditating, thinking, weighing, evaluating, balancing. This whole thing is a study of contemplating. I'm not telling you necessarily what somebody else's rules are or encyclopedia meaning is, other than the fact Aleph actually does mean taught, trained, domesticated, of the house, 1,001, and ox. That's what Aleph, the word Aleph means. Bet means house, and as a prefix letter, bet is translated to be either in, on, with, among, through, against, or in the condition of. In other words, you don't necessarily write the words in the condition of, but when you see a letter bet, it's telling you it's in the condition of. Many times you'll see the letter bet in front of a word, in front of a verb, means against. Ishmael's hand would be against his brothers. Well, that's just the letter bet. But bet can also mean in and with. So is Ishmael's hand going to be in Isaac's hand, holding with? Translators get to determine. The teachers, the rabbis, the professors get to tell you. But we're just trying to look at what he said. So I'm going to tell you why I wrote the chart such as it is, where the 10 commandments of Exodus 20 are ordered, are correlated, are indexed, aligned with the alphabet letter sequence. So to say that Aleph lines up with the phrase, I am Yahweh. If you notice in the writing of Scripture that words that start with an Aleph, if it's a verb, it's generally translated as either I am or I will. This is my identity, this is my intent. I will run is Aleph Resh Zadi. That's the word earth. But Resh Zadi means to run. So Aleph Resh Zadi could be read, I will run, or I am about running. Running what? You look in the dictionary, and Resh Zadi means to run a course, like a courier on a route, or a guy running a 50-yard dash. That's his track, versus the marathon runner that runs 33 miles or whatever it is on a long distance run. So the course, the route, the track that you're on is your Resh Zadi, and you doing it is the Aleph. So that mind says, Alephness is my intention, my will, my Shem, where I'm at, what I'm about to do. So for Yahuwah to say, I am Yahweh, he invented the name, he determined the declaration, the expression. So that's an Aleph sort of statement. To liken it to Daniel 12 for the Archangel Gabriel, and I know those are English words based on, let's call it Latin dogma, but the point is, Archangel, who made that declaration? What does the word arch mean and angel mean? Whatever. But the point is, I'm saying this big shot from heaven is sent on a mission. The word malak means one sent on a mission, on a task, this is your job, go do that. So Gabriel was sent from heaven, from Elohim, on a job to go give Daniel his job. So Daniel to take on the job. Okay, this is now my place, my Shem, my occupation, my mind is going to be all about this, and I'm going to be intent and focused on now this task that was handed to me. So that becomes Daniel's Aleph. That's why Daniel 12:4, I see is that position. Okay, so let's go back to Deuteronomy, or being Deuteronomy 5, Exodus 20. For Yahuwah to say, I am Yahweh, that's a concept. You're Elohim. Well, that's a different concept than the Aleph. And just because of the alphabetic sequence order, it's in the bet position. Well, what is bet? Bet is the second letter, and some people say, nowhere in Scripture does it necessarily tell us that bet means it's the number 2. That's the letter assigned to the number value. And if you go to Psalm 119, here's the Aleph section, the bet section, the Gimel section, all in alphabetic order, 22 sections. Someone was telling me the other day that, and this is just historical reference, that to correlate a letter to a number was a later development. How many of those do you have? I got bet. What does that mean? Oh, I got 2 of them. These are ideas. Don't let it kick your head around. The idea that bet means with the number 2. It's not just 1, it's another one with the number 1. Against, well, you got to have 1 and then another one to have the association of, is it with, is it against, is it on, is it in, is it? The concept of bet is 2 in association. That's betness. And the way it's drawn in paleo is this embryonic shape, this tadpole shape, this tent view, like a top view of a tent in a simplified format where you have the enclave, what you might call the personal space, and then it opens up. So it's like one arm tucking this way and the other arm moving this way. So you have the social space and the personal space within one's own space. So the idea that Yahuwah can say, my identity, my mind, is that I am your Elohim. So this bet position is all about you. Well, if you don't associate with that identification, that people group, then these 10 commandments got nothing to do with you. Because these are the 10 matters. Let's step aside from the meaning or the word or even the telling of the word commandment. A mitzvot is a command. A chok is a command. A Torah is an instruction, but that's neither of these. This is a dabar. The word dabar means word, so you could call this 10 words. You look in the dictionary, and the word dalet, bet, resh, dabar also can mean a matter. Or a
1
thing.
second. Herb, do you mind turning off the camera, buddy? Thank you.
So these are 10 matters, 10 things. But the word 10 is spelled ayin, shin, resh, pronounced chasher, not asher. That would be aleph, shin, resh, or esher. Yishar would be yod, shin, resh, like in yod, shin, resh, aleph, lamed, pronounced Israel, or some people say Yasharel. See, people, the whole Sibboleth, Shibboleth. One whole tribe was killed, identified to be killed because they pronounced that word Shibboleth differently, SH or S. For example, if two people claim to be of a certain sort and someone wanted to distinguish between the British and the Americans, they'd say the word schedule or shed. The British say schedule because it's spelled with an SH. The Americans say schedule as if it's SCH, schedule. Well, people say things differently. I mean, the British had the language before the Americans, but why are they still wrong? Just a joke, Paul. Anyway, what I'm saying is that within a certain language, there's all these variations. So we're just trying to look at this. So if somebody says it's Yashar El or Israel or Yashar, Isar, El, E, Sharel, where do you put the pronunciation? So the rabbis, in order to make a uniformity of linguistic commonality, that people could feel like, yeah, this is one people. In the Middle Ages, 1000 AD or roughly, they came up with these things called nikud, dots and lines, which are the vowel expressions. And then there's also sometimes what's called cantillation marks on the top of the word, little other dashes. So if you're singing, you know how to form the expression and get a rhythm and a meter going. And does any of that matter? If you want a cohesive society, perhaps it matters, but the Paleo-Hebrew is looking at none of that. So we're just looking at the value of the letters. So if somebody doesn't like the way I pronounce the words, please excuse me. Let's try to deal with the content just for the sake of learning. Going back to Deuteronomy 20. I am Yahweh, Aleph. Who are you? Who's the bet? Who is the you that's supposed to regard the fact that the Aleph just opened the conversation and declared his own identity? You is whoever wants to be Israel, Yasharel. Whoever chooses to identify with that people group. So if you belong to an organization or a philosophy or a political entity that says we got nothing to do with that people, okay, then forget it. Don't worry about anything else, because Yahweh is saying right out of the gate, this following set of words Asher, ayin shin resh, means to be enriched or made wealthy. Well, this is a treasure, and it also means 10. So here's 10 matters which are treasures or great value to this particular people group. Okay, well, if you're not the people group, maybe that treasure is just junk to you. Maybe you'd like to find it valuable, but you don't know how it's valuable or how to. I mean, if it's something shiny and sparkly, and like, oh, hey, is that gold? Is it worth some money? Well, even if you found a piece of gold and stuck it on your shelf, it's of no value to you until you try to cash it in and say, well, I know what gold is worth. It's a couple $1,000 an ounce on the market right now. And by golly, I'm going to save that until it gets to be 10,000. I'm going to cash it in. And then I've got a lot of wealth. I've got a lot of money. But there's a verse in the scripture that says one of these days, it was in Isaiah or Jeremiah, I think, one of these days, people are going to throw their gold and silver into the street. Why would they do that? Worthless, worth nothing. Well, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, the president, declared it illegal to hold gold back in your possession. I think it was back in the 30s. That would be one reason to give it up. But I'm just imagining some scenario. What if somebody had say a military event where they, let's say, dropped a nuclear bomb, anyway, the point is, they dropped some sort of bomb where all of a sudden the gold or the silver attracted and held the toxicity. Then you might say, oh, I can't have this stuff. Get it out of my house. Especially if the government, to help us, said, hey, we're going to send some trucks around and scoop all this stuff up, guys dressed in hazmat suits, so you don't even have to touch it. Just throw your silver and gold into the street and go, oh, I don't want to get contaminated. Sure, I'll do that. In which case, now the gold is a negative asset, a liability. It's not worth anything, and as you keep it, it'll harm you. So what's it really worth? It's only worth the value that somebody appropriates at any moment. So we can look at these 10 commandments and say, what are these 10 commandments worth? They're nailed to the cross. They're not worth anything. And if you trust in the law, you've fallen from grace. It's worth less than nothing. Now it's a demerit. I mentioned the other day, just so you know, on Mountain Air 7, I'm down here in California a moment for the consideration of this week. I've been Festival of Unleavened Bread. Pesach was a couple days ago. Different calendar than when I was on celebrating it up in Oregon, and some people are yet hence in front of us. But just so you know, there's 3 videos on Mountain Air 7 that we did. The idea that we could sit there and say, well, somebody sent in the mail some literature. It was from a Seventh-day Adventist guy, and it was promoting their ideology. And he was saying he went to a church, and the pastor of the church said, hey, are you one of those guys who thinks we got to keep the 10 commandments? And he says, yeah. And he says, ha, those were nailed to the cross. And he says, well, I don't believe that. He says, yep, and he quotes from Colossians and Ephesians and this and that. So this SDA guy was writing this article to say, listen, the ceremonial law was nailed to the cross, so that's why we don't keep the festivals. And the handwriting of ordinances that Moshe wrote with his hand, which is all of Deuteronomy and Exodus and Genesis and all this other stuff, that was certainly nailed to the cross, but not the 10 commandments, because those aren't handwritten ordinances from a man, Moshe. They're from the finger of Elohim, written on tables of stone. And the church leader was saying, those were nailed to the cross too. So this whole article was this fellow trying to discriminate between ceremonial law, nailed to the cross, God's finger written on stone, that's got to be still valid, and anything Moses wrote, or anybody else for that matter, even if it was Paul or Peter or James or John, that's all nailed to the cross too. Is that true? If it's true, these words are worthless. They're not asher. Maybe 10, but they're not anything to make you wealthy. It's garbage to be thrown into the street because it just might contaminate your mind, which will contaminate your heart, which might just drive you to hell, which is the opposite of your destination. So if you want to believe that all these matters are the pathetic, horrible, disastrous law sneaking up on you to grab you, and we talked about this in one of the videos, like a puma, like a mountain lion, stalking you. Terry read something he saw online about somebody had posted from a particular group that said 3 ways that the law can sneak up on you, get you, and whoa, what happened? And it's like, whoa. So if you're not Israel and Yahuwah is not your Elohim, stay away from these words. They are not Asher Devarim. Yes, they're 10 matters, but they're not wealthy words of great treasure. Okay, that's Aleph and Bet. We'll go a little quicker through the other letters, but let's go to Gimel. So you look on the chart in the Aleph column off to the right, because Hebrew is written right to left, and that's the way the chart's organized. It says, I am Yahweh. That's in the Aleph column. Your Elohim Bet. So the next one, like what I went through with Daniel, the next concept is the Gimel. So here's what it says in Exodus 20, verse 2. I'm Yahweh, your Elohim, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt. That's a Gimel concept, the verb. He says, I picked you up and I took you out. I'm going to elaborate the phrasing to accentuate the letter meaning within there. What is Gimel? Well, Gimel's camel. Gimel's the letter with a foot. What does a camel do? It carries baggage like a truck, like a ship, the ship of the desert. The camel picks something up and it carries it from point A to point B. I took you out of the land of Egypt. Then he goes on to say, from the house of slavery. Well, that's kind of the same thing as Gimel. He's telling us now where he took us. But I'm going to say that Dalet could be from the house of slavery, from out of that house. How do you get out of a house? From a door. Dalet's a door. So that's the next position. But there's an inferred Dalet. If he takes us out of Egypt from the house of slavery, yeah, that's Gimel Dalet. And the word Gimel Dalet is pronounced Gad or God. And the word spelled Gimel Dalet is where we get the word fortune and benefit, luck. The god of luck of the Canaanites was called Gad. When Leah gave birth to her next son, she said, how fortunate for me. How Gad? She named him Gad. Gad also means to cut dates from the tree, to remove the wealth of this tree and take it into your own possession, which is exactly what Yahuwah was doing at this point in the narrative story. So I'm saying these are different ways you can read the text if you do this task in your own mind and your own study of aligning in sequential order. We're just messing around. I don't know of anybody who said, oh, you should do this, you can do this. It's just something to do. We're just, as children, as artists, we're just looking at the way things are built, the language, the story, the narrative. Isn't it interesting that Exodus 20, verse 2, I'm Yahweh your Elohim, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery, can be read as A, B, C, D, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. I will take you into my personal possession, robbing the Egyptians of their wealth, the Israelites, and bringing you into my own possession. The meaning of the word Gimel Dalet. Just interesting, looking at the dictionary and being able to wrap your mind around this. But the inferred Dalet is, he said, I am taking you into my house, my kingdom. You're now my possession. We are told constantly when we think of Yahuwah to have the confidence that when he says, I'm your fortress, I'm your strength, I'm your high tower, I'm your refuge. Okay, he's pulled us in through that door of the alien into his door to be domestic, which is Aleph, which is then we have an obligation to learn his ways. He says, I've taken you from being a slave, and if you look in the dictionary, a slave is spelled Ayin Bet Dalet, Obed, where we get the word obedience and Obadiah. But he says, you will serve me. Well, that's the same word, Obed. Okay, he's taking us from bondage, which is Yod Zadi Resh, Yitzar. There's a bondage to be wrapped up and confined. My fortress, there's different ways to spell fortress, but one way is Zadi Resh Yod. So interesting looking at the spelling of words. From Yod Zadi Resh to Zadi Resh Yod. This other guy binds you and confines you, but then Yahweh says, you're my servant. All you did is take the Yod from the prefix and drop it onto the suffix. Pretty interesting. We're now his treasure because he looted the country where he had sent his people to be in bondage. It's all part of the story. But that's Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Then you look at Hey, it's verse 3. You shall not recognize the gods of others in my presence. Well, I remember it says, you will not make for yourself, or you will not have in my face other gods. There's different ways to read this. What it says is, Lo yiyi lecha Elohim achrim al panei. That's all it says. Lo, do not, Yod Hey, Yod Hey. Well, Yod Hey is Yaya. No Yayas? Lamed Kaf is translated go. It's also unto yourself. It's also get out. Lek, Leka, Lamed Kaf is the name of one of the parashahs where Abraham was told to get out of where he lived and go to another place. So what does that word mean? For you, of you, for yourself, unto you, yours. No yayas of yours. See, you gotta sit there and say, what the heck is going on? But if I now put this in the hey position, because it's after the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, what is hey? Well, hey is to express, reveal, enlighten, point to. One description of the letter hey, which sets up one drawing of the letter hey, is that it's a line with three other lines coming out the side. That's supposed to mean. Because one of the writings of the Paleo letter is a man standing like this with his arms up in a vertical body and a couple legs, and maybe you don't even draw the legs, so it's just a vertical with two arms and a head, and then you turn it sideways, and that's where you get the vertical with three going sideways. Well, which is the real way to draw the hey? Doesn't matter. Why? Because if you see somebody and you're trying to get their attention, you go, hey! That's the letter hey. The reason why I draw it with a vertical and three off the side is because even, from what I understand, even on aeronautical maps showing the jet stream and prevailing winds near airports and all for pilots, is that they still use that symbol today, a vertical with three lines saying this is the way the wind blows. In graphic arts of the era of Art Deco in the 1930s and 40s, they used three lines. You'll see them on automobiles of that era quite often. They're called streamlines. It's just a graphic. But what's the vertical? If three lines are like radiant light or wind, what's the vertical? It's the edge of a window. So you could say, well, if you're allowed to see something, hey, here's a window and light, and look, turn the light on. That's all the letter hey. But he's saying, don't even allow a window of looking at other gods, or don't make for yourself a window. In other words, don't go to the museum and say, hey, what did those other people do to worship their false idols? Hey, let's go look at all the stuff of Tutankhamun when it comes to the museum. Why? Well, it's interesting. He said, don't remember, don't learn, don't address, don't talk about it. And yet we make museums and encyclopedias. Should I intentionally hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil? The three monkeys, remember that? That's kind of what he's telling us to do. He says, I don't want you guys teaching your kids in school and giving them tests and kicking them around and making them feel bad for themselves if they don't learn all the names and stories of those Greek and Roman and Egyptian and Assyrian gods and all those other religions. That's what we do because we're a multicultural country, era of appreciating everybody else's perspective. But Yahweh said, if you're Israel, don't do that. No window. No. Hey. When it concerns Elohim Achrim, again, it's called gods of others or other gods, two different ways, two different meanings, essentially the same. But then he has this curious thing, al panei, connected. Ayin lamed is a yoke. Panei, well, that's the word face. In connection with my face, in reference to my face. Don't have any other gods that represent my face. What does that mean? Well, it's gods of others. I can have gods of my own that represent his face, but if it's other people's gods, shouldn't do that. Is that what it means? What it says is don't recognize. Recognize, there's no word recognize here. Lo, ye, leka, Elohim, Achrim, al panei. Where did Stone's Tanakh come up with this idea of recognition and presence? And I'm telling you, this is the problem with translating. So you got to be able to look at this and put your mind in a different place. And just to readdress what we're doing, I'm organizing these matters with the alphabetic letter sequence to say this is just another method of organization. So if you know the Hebrew letters, you can do this. If you recognize Hebrew letters and say, yep, I know what those letters are, okay, that's step one. Hey, I can quote the alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. Okay, that's another thing you can do. And you can learn how to read. You can group the letters together and say, oh, I know that that's how the word Kaf Lamed Bet means dog. Okay, very good. That's another thing you can do. This is a whole different thing that has nothing to do with any of those things. It's looking at the alphabet letter sequence and the meaning of the letters and the particular order they come in as this grid, this matrix, this index of Yahweh revealing himself. Because the alphabet itself, starting with Aleph, means I am, I will. Put this matter, these words, this alphabet, into Bet, into a construct state, and make it possible, Gimel action, to Dalet enter this portal of, hey, understanding, whoa, but if you do that, you better not have Elohim Achrim, because this is the one true Elohim, creator of the universe, represented by the Aleph. So what I'm saying is that this is the method of knowing him. By looking at the alphabet itself, and when I keep saying, it's all about the alphabet, it's all about the alphabet, you gotta look at the letters. No, it's not. I'm not obsessive with the alphabet. I just recognize the treasure that it is. And then we're trying to say, how do you use this thing? If it's a tool, how do you do it? So then he gives us a clue. He says the next sentence, verse 4, you shall now make for yourself a carved image. Okay, is that one sentence? Do we then go to the next one? Or is still part of the Vav position? Nor any likeness of that which is in the heaven above, or in the earth below, or in the waters beneath the earth. Then verse 5 says, do not prostrate yourself, or do not bow to them. Or so what I'm saying is that part of part of the struggle, part of the task of organizing this grid, this matrix, to this narrative list of words is to say, where do you make the break? And I'll show you in a moment why the breaks are where I put them. But right now we're in the Vav position, and we don't know where to stop Vav and bump into Zion, but the letter after Zion is a Het. And knowing the letter Zion is a weapon, there's a certain break. And knowing that Het is a fence in a compound, there's a natural break there because it's almost like a wall, like a castle, and Zion is like this moat. Vav, well, Vav is a connector, a nail, a man, the number 6. If there's a moat in front of a castle, you need something like a drawbridge, like they did in the Middle Ages, or even today. We have Vancouver, Washington, Portland, Oregon, and there's a couple bridges crossing the river. Those are Vavs connecting the 2 cities, connecting the 2 states. A common language connects 2 different people groups. Those are all Vavs, not just a nail or a pin. So we're looking at this, and when he says in the Vav position, do not make yourself a carved image or any likeness in the heavens or on earth or under the earth. Well, then why did Solomon have angels and lions, pomegranate trees, palm trees, pomegranate fruit? Why did he do that? Didn't it betray this commandment? Well, if it did, was Solomon such a smart guy? Or didn't Yahuwah have the Bezalel and the Holiab make woven embroideries? Angels? Were they humanoids with wings? We don't know what they were. They might have just been a burst of light pattern. We don't know what they were. On top of the Ark of the Covenant, there apparently was angel forms with wings touching each other. I don't know how to explain that. I'm just reading his words. And if the Vav, if we're talking about the Aleph Bet, then the big question is, how do we connect with Yahweh? If we're the Bet and he's the Aleph and we're separated, which is a Gimel, connect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect, we want to enter his presence. What's the Vav? What's the connecting mechanism? Do not make the carved image. What if it's an embroidered image? What if it's a painted image, a photographic image? That says carved image. We can look at the word carved. That's another part of the study. I'm just saying, anytime you start scrutinizing what did he say, you bump into all this other stuff. Good thing to think about. What did he mean? Ponder for yourself and talk with others about the same matter. And whether or not you come to a conclusion, there's a benefit in the pondering. Don't make a carved image or any likeness. So I have determined for myself as an artist not to, and I'm not putting that burden on anybody else, I've put the burden on myself not to make sculpted images of animals and people and angels and deities. And why not? If I have one day to do some art, I'll do something else, but not that. Just my choice. There's some great artists that make great things that look so realistic, and they can do whatever they want. I don't care. But I'm going to find a different way to express what I put my hand to, and I'm not putting the burden on anybody else. Determine for yourself. But there's somehow a connecting bridge if we don't do this, if we don't make a carved image. What's the connecting bridge? Knowing him, being in his presence. He just, the sentence before talked about in my presence or yoked to my face. So when people do a painting, this is the face of God, the face of a Messiah, the face of an angel, the face of... They can do whatever they want. I'm not going to do that. Nor then can I appreciate what they're doing, because I've already alienated myself from within regarding those matters. And so now I find them to be a little disturbing or agitating because I've removed myself, disoriented myself from that whole mindset, that whole heart set.